Hi, Joey. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me tonight. It's really stoked to be talking with you all.
We're it's such a pleasure to have you tonight. Like we're we're speechless about
Yes.
how big an honor it is to have somebody with your experience here, because there's a lot of people who listen to this show who want to learn, who want to prepare for the inevitable legalization in the Philippines and want to learn how to grow weed. And it's important that they should learn how to grow it
Proper
the
way.
most earth friendly
Yeah.
ways, the kindest
Yep.
ways, because
And
it's medicine, so let's heal the earth. Would you like to
yes,
talk about your experience as a permaculture farmer?
Yeah, well, I just want to thank you all again for having me. It's a real honor to get to chat with you guys. I've known Bert for about a year now. Bert started coming to our seed swap events that we put on. We started putting on some free educational events where we would teach some natural farming and gather our community together. And Bert was a big part of those. Brought his dad to our first one, and brought his family to our last one. And just want to send you lots of love, Bert, during this time of transition, and sending lots of love to Papa too. And yeah, it was a real honor to have Bert be a part of those. Brought his wife and kids out to. It was really special, and we were going to do an event this last January. We had another one planned, and we had to cancel it, unfortunately. But we had planned to have you guys up and have a table, and
Yeah. Oh, we really wanted to go.
yeah, bummer. We're going to do another one in March and April, so we'll try to get you guys.
We'll be there.
Yeah.
yes,
Did you
I
cancel
really
because of
want
the
to,
weather?
yeah, better weather,
Yeah,
exactly.
the weather.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and
it was
actually, sir, the real honor is for you, sir. Thank you
oh,
for
you guys are too kind.
accepting me as a part of the family and
Oh,
us.
hello, we're
Thank you.
Well, I'm so impressed by the brave work you guys are doing, on the front lines of this fight. You've got to be brave to be in cannabis, and you guys are really brave to be taking this head on, fighting for what you believe in it, and fighting for this medicine for people. So I have so much admiration for anybody that's a warrior for cannabis, and you guys have faced a really oppressive history out there of cannabis. And what you're doing, this education is so important, because that's really the only way we change any minds. And
Absolutely.
and there's enough research out there that it's already been proven. I don't feel like we need to prove anything.
We
Yes,
don't.
There.
Yeah, for sure.
Getting it
But
in front of people and letting them understand it, and letting them understand that this is the gateway drug. You don't need to worry about that. This drug can really help people with the harder drugs. The Philippines struggles with their drug problems just like the U.S. And methamphetamine has got a grip on this whole world right now, and we see a lot of communities are able to turn to cannabis and these other natural medicines to get away from these really addictive substances that are frankly killing a lot of our communities. I know it's a lot of that's going on down there. So yeah, I grew up in Northern California in what is called the Emerald Triangle.
Yeah.
Place with a lot of cannabis history. We consider it part of the of the cannabis industry, where a lot of the first battles were fought, a lot of the first strains were brought and starting to be shared, and a lot of effort was put into creating really good genetics, and the whole industry was born. The seeds were brought from here to Amsterdam, and the whole European cannabis scene that we see came out of that. And yeah, we were fortunate to have medical cannabis come into California in 1996. And so when I was growing up in Humboldt County in the 80s and the 90s, it was very illegal. Cultivation was a felony. You would go to jail if you were caught growing. If there were cannabis plants, it was during the drug war. It was Nixon had come in and in 1972 and passed this Dangerous Drugs Act. I was reading that's when the Philippines also classified it as a class 1 drug, same as heroin and methamphetamine and all these terrible drugs. And then, yeah, Ronald Reagan came in the 80s with the war on drugs here in the U.S., and that was just all bets were off. 1982, the year I was born, is when they started this federal and state-funded attack on cannabis farmers here in Northern California. So as a kid, there would be military convoys, army trucks, people with machine guns going down our little driveway, down our dirt road. I lived in a neighborhood out in the mountains, an hour from the closest small town. And it was, it was
I have a
a real
question.
Yes,
Is
Julie?
the Emerald Triangle also what they call the Murder Mountain, like the ones in the documentary?
Exactly. This is Humboldt
Yeah.
County. I grew up a Murder Mountain adjacent, we call it, about an hour away from Murder Mountain.
Yeah.
And yes, it's made up of 3 counties: Humboldt, Mendocino, and Trinity County, and that makes up the Emerald Triangle. And 3 areas that were very famous for cannabis, and now overregulation has literally crumbled the industry. As anyone here in California knows, they've just regulated it to death. It's destroyed my little community. You go to my hometown now, and it's like a ghost town. Every business is closed because cannabis supported everything. We saw that a healthy economy can sprout up around cannabis, but when you get too greedy and you put the power in the hands of the big companies who have to answer to boards of directors, it's a race to the bottom, and that's how all these small farming communities get killed. Big money comes in, and so growing up there, it was scary during those times. When we were learning to grow, we had to grow plants in the shade, under the shade of trees or in the bushes, or we would climb up in the tops of the trees and hide the plants in the trees, because they would come with helicopters, and they would have guys hanging from a cable from a helicopter, and they could hang him and
This is the go down.
hang them right down in the trees. So it was a real game of cat and mouse and trying to hide. And as a young teenager, it was a very exciting thing to get into. I was fortunate that to be right there in the heart of it, and my parents were supportive of what I was into. This was also at the time, a young teenager, that I became aware of permaculture and took my first permaculture design course. Permaculture is a design system started by an Australian named Bill Mollison in the 70s. It's an awesome design system for designing a business, designing a piece of land. It's a set of principles and ethics. And the ethics are people care, earth care, and fair share, which means any yields go back to supporting those first 2 principles, people care and earth care. So it's a very holistic design system that works really well when you're, designing a piece of land. The goal growing up here as a young cannabis farmer was to have my own farm, to eventually have my own land where I can grow and have a family. I think that's what a lot of people want, that simpler return to the land where you can grow your own food, take some medicine and food sovereignty into your own hands. Was really the goal, and still is. We're working really hard.
It's the dream.
Yeah.
I actually took a permaculture class with Starhawk, the Earth Activist training, and it blew my mind as a Filipino coming from Typhoon Haiyan, coming from all of these, like just watching the destruction that's been happening in the Philippines because of overdevelopment, and knowing that there's a solution to that. There's a farming system that's constantly, or that is currently evolving to answer climate change, to answer like stuff like that. And if you were to marry, I've been talking to some cannabis farmers, asking them if they've been applying principles or the permaculture principles, and even to them it's still new. So this is what's exciting about you, because you're a permaculturist and a cannabis farmer, and I want to know how you've been able to, like, has it been productive for you? What are the benefits of embracing permaculture as cannabis farmers?
Yes.
Yeah, well, those design principles are everything, and really, we gotta start off by saying, permaculture was really branded by these Australians, but what we're really talking about is indigenous knowledge. Whether it's indigenous knowledge that came from the Philippines, or it came from the Americas, or it came from Europe. I mean, we're all indigenous to wherever we came from. And when you go to places like the Philippines, or you go to places where you see that they don't call these things permaculture; they call them common sense.
We
And
call
it's
them
only
kainin.
in the West that we have been so wasteful in our practices that we can even have any other way of existence. That we would call things like creating no waste and using our available on-site resources, that we would have to create a name for this as if these aren't the obvious ways we should do everything.
Right.
And
this is something that's very common with Filipinos already, because we're islands. We don't produce a lot of the things that come in. So when they come in, we have to make the most use of the things because we don't know when the next shipment is gonna arrive. So no waste, these labels seem to be a way to repackage these practices in order for them to be acceptable by people who've been molded by capitalism.
Absolutely, Ara. Absolutely, yeah. So that I'm glad you caught all that. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. Is we're not coming up with anything new here, and these are really just the best ways to do these things. So as I was learning those principles and trying to design cannabis farms and design my cannabis grow or design a business, of course I'm going to look to use my available on-site resources. What do we have here available to us already? That's where a lot of techniques like Korean natural farming and the Jadam system of farming, where we make a lot of our own farming inputs out of plants that we gather in the forest or plants that we can grow easily. That's where we talk about closing these loops, and that's a form of closing the loop. We can use things like the waste from our cannabis plants. Certain times of the year we'll go in and we'll clean out the inside of the plants right before flower to get better airflow and to get the plant to focus its energy into the flowering tops. We'll clean out the leaf, but we can use all that leaf. That's not a waste stream. That's a valuable resource.
Exactly.
We can use that to make liquid fertilizer, or we can put it directly on our soil and use it as mulch, or we can feed it to a worm farm. There's many things. So it's really just embracing those principles, more so than saying this is the exact technique everybody should do. It's more just understanding those principles of working with nature. Nature has this divine intelligence, these complex systems that are very diverse and are very strong because of that. If one part of the system fails, there's another part to step in and fill that void. And so permaculture is really about building systems that mimic nature. They really emphasize spending a lot of time in nature, observing nature, going onto a piece of land and spending a year there before you even break ground so you can see it in all of the seasons. Where does the water flow? Where's the sunny, where's the hot drifts coming through in the summer? Where are the fire hazards going to come from? Something we really have to look at here in California. I love permaculture. I love those permaculture principles. I love to go onto a new piece of land and start thinking about these things. And shout out to you, Ara. We were talking live and taking that Earth activist training for Starhawk. She's a very, very well-respected permaculture teacher and incredible author, and we just have a lot of love and respect for her in the community. So you're super blessed to get to study with her, and I hope you get to
I definitely felt blessed.
Yes, sir.
But
You're a real inspiration
too,
sir.
I wanted to ask about, so a lot of people who watch who watch this channel are interested in growing cannabis but don't really know a lot about permaculture. So even concepts like what constitutes the loop and what do you mean by closing the loop, these are things that we I think we could do you mind talking about what does a loop look like in a cannabis farm? What are the resources?
Well, we've got inputs and we've got outputs. We've got inputs that we need to input onto the farm, and we've got outputs that are waste streams. If we can connect these two so they're feeding each other, that's closing the loop. So what are the inputs that we need for our farm? We need water, we need fertilizer, we might need compost. What are the ways we can generate those? And then what are the waste streams coming off of our farm? Do we have animals on our farm? Or do we have manures we're already producing? do we have composting toilets? We can use human manure, if composted correctly. It's how our ancestors farmed for eons. We wouldn't be here today if our ancestors hadn't known how to use human and animal manures and compost them really simply. There's a really fantastic book called Farmers of 40 Centuries that was written, it's an account written in the 1800s, late 1800s, of a man touring China, and he toured Korea, and he toured Japan. And he looked at how they were farming and how they'd been farming for 40 centuries already. And there was a market, many markets around manures, human manures and animal manure. And how best to use those manures. And that's how these guys were farming. So simple ways. The old ways are still the best ways. Learning how to compost, learning how to use animal manures, and learning how to use the plants around you are still the best ways. So, figuring out what are those resources in your community. It doesn't have to just come off of your farm. But what are the free resources in your community? We have a beer brewery near us that has a lot of spent grain.
In the Philippines, that could be rice grains, after they've been milled. Yeah.
You can go and get those grains. Around here we have a lot of people doing fire prevention work. So there's a lot of wood chips.
Yes,
so
cool.
Figure out where can you get wood chips. Are there people in your neighborhood who bag up their leaves every time a leaf falls off their tree? Go drive around your neighborhood and gather up those leaves. You can close other people's loops. All these waste clippings, valuable resources. So that's what we mean when we say closing the loop. We make all our own liquid fertilizers from plants growing on our property. Mostly when we're growing cannabis, our base fertilizer we make out of cannabis. Just like I mentioned earlier, we'll use the fast-growing vegetative leaves in springtime. We'll cut those off and make a high nitrogen vegetative fertilizer.
See, so for the record, organic compost really is healthy enough to provide all of the nutrients that the cannabis flower needs, right?
Yes.
Because I've heard from people where it's not enough. They tell me that compost is not enough nutrients for cannabis.
Well, there's many ways to grow it. We prefer to grow it in the soil. Where we can make use of all the microbes and all the biology that is in living soil. Because once again, we want nature to do all the work. We want to tap into these systems that already exist. So when you have, living soil, it's different than dead dirt. And the difference is all that biology. It's full of microbes and fungi and bacteria. And they can do a lot of that work for us. Cannabis is a hungry plant. It does like to eat a lot of nitrogen during veg. And it does like some phosphorus during flowering.
Yes.
But once you get healthy soils, they're going to do a lot of the work for you. In natural farming, a lot of what we're doing is just trying to build those biological colonies in the soil. And that can do most of the work for us. And so another way we use some of our resources here and close our loops. I mentioned we're in Northern California, where we're in fire country. I'm actually living in Lake County for the last year, which is even hotter and drier than the Emerald Triangle and more of a fire risk. So we spend a lot of the year going into the forest and clearing out all the dead trees and the dead branches, clearing along our roads so that it's safe to get in and out of the property when we do have to evacuate, which is very common with the wildfires here. And so we have all those wood resources. Normally people would just burn this and all that CO2 into the atmosphere, and it's a resource.
On that note, is it my connection or just the connection?
I think it's everyone.
Oh, because on that note, there's this, I learned also that there's this practice here where you have controlled fires, small fires to burn down material that might contribute to larger fires later on. And apparently there's a practice in the Philippines called kaingin, where people would burn parts of the forest in order to use the land to farm on, which is, I'm learning, is a permaculture practice, or it complies with certain principles. But when I was growing up, the way that the mindset is in the Philippines in a lot of pockets is that if it's indigenous knowledge, it's somehow inferior to Western
Yeah,
information
West
or
Coast.
Western resources. So a lot of
That's what they keep
Filipinos
saying.
already practice organic farming by default because they can't afford fertilizers because it just doesn't make sense. So there's already a lot of these
Mhm.
practices, a lot of eco-friendly practices within Philippine society. They just feel like it's not they're not supported in their inherent crunchiness. You know what I mean? So it's living soil is something that I'm glad you talked about it because
Yeah.
we this is something that is only starting to take off in the Philippines, like
Yes.
no-till solutions, like not
Yes.
touching the soil in order to not break up the the all of the different connections that you have underground to maintain like what you were talking about with living soil. What's your experience with living soil?
Yeah, it's everything. And what the last little piece of what I was going to say, a big part of what we use those wood resources for is to build these hugel culture beds. And this is a bed with a bunch of that wood at the bottom of the bed. We'll
Mhm.
actually dig a trench. We'll lay bigger logs in the bottom and smaller branches on top, and then that's our carbon layer. And then we do a nitrogen layer on top of that, of manures or alfalfa, and then our soil on top of that. And this is a way of building living soils that are going to last for decades to come.
Mhm.
Our kids and grandkids will harvest food and cannabis out of these beds if they're built correctly.
Yeah.
And so we are here in Northern California. We deal with the drought every summer. So in the winter, these beds, they're built on a contour. So they're straight, they're level across the hillside. So the rains come and they hit that bed and they get slowed down and they get spread out. And then that water sinks down into that bed. And
Mhm.
that wood, as it's breaking down, it absorbs it and it holds it like a sponge. And you're
Mhm.
creating this perfect environment under there for microbes, for fungi and bacteria to come to life as that nitrogen and carbon break down and basically have this perfect compost pile underneath your soil. And
Right.
this was a technique that's practiced all around the world, but we know this word hugelkultur from Germany, where it comes from, where they were doing this to extend the growing season, because that heat generated from that wood will actually extend the growing season during the cold spring and in the cold fall. So you could get maybe another month of harvest, which might save your family. So once again, we're closing the loop using all that wood that people would just burn. We're using that to build these soils. So now the garden that I got to grow in this year, this is the third year of those hugels, and that wood is deteriorating and breaking down. And every year we're able to water. The cannabis gets better, the vegetables get better. You're talking about living soil, the importance of living soil. And as we've seen with food, that if you want the most nutrient dense food, you need to grow it organically. You cannot grow it with these pesticides and fungicides and
Yeah.
fertilizers. The
They don't
results,
taste good.
if you want nutrient dense food, you need to get to you need to connect with a farmer and get it as close to the farm as possible. And so this is absolutely the same thing is true with our medicine that we get from plants. If you want nutrient dense medicine, which in our case might mean the cannabinoids, it might mean THC, it might mean CBG, but also it's all these other cannabinoids that we don't even know about. It's the full cocktail, scratching the surface of what cannabis contains. But you need to get this cannabis from a nutrient-dense source, from healthy living soils. If you want the best cannabis in the world, it's got to come out of those living soils. For my taste, at least. And yeah, we do all we can to just educate people on living soils, simple ways to farm with nature, pair with nature, and like we said, more just learning principles so you can adapt them to your context. Because permaculture and natural farming are being practiced all around the world. They're being practiced all over the Philippines. And what works there isn't going to work here. Things are very different tropics than they do in our Mediterranean climate.
Actually, this is what we need to hear, like from the Philippines, because what we have there back home, I'm telling you, soil over there, you will love it, sir. If you saw it, I'm like, oh
We
my god,
don't have we don't have
why?
frost. we don't have to worry about the four
Yes, and the
season
soil
system.
over there, so rich.
Like everything you
We,
grow
we,
there.
we just need we just need like a support or whoever can, because the farmers over there right now, they're like agriculture is not being supported by the
It's
government.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
majority is really it's really an agricultural country.
So it's like
And
they didn't know that we have the best soil. They just didn't know. So this is like the best live right now. So they can open their mind like, oh man, this is all we
And
need.
not
We have
only
this in
that,
the
like
Philippines.
planting cannabis also helps the soil, right?
yeah.
Yes.
So it's like
Mhm.
just a cycle of goodness, basically. If they just learn the pattern of like really maximizing their organic surroundings, and then making the most
Yes.
out of it, because the Philippines is very rich with
This is why
uh,
when I met Sir Joey, I was
organic
like, oh, I
farming.
need to learn more.
I have a
Yeah.
question about
This is
like
why.
you
Because
had a
this,
point,
this is the
June,
correct
that was
way.
interesting, or you were talking about what does cannabis do for the soil? Like how does it interact with other plants? What plants would be good to, like if you were to make
I does a lot.
a
There
guild
you go.
around or using cannabis, what would be beneficial
Right.
plants to grow with it?
Just around surrounding it.
Because it
Well,
killed my revenue.
well, here in Northern California, we have a very long season. You know, we grow this plant for 8 or 9 months. We start our
Yeah.
seeds in February, and we're harvesting them in November. So it has a very long season. Those plants start going in the ground in May and June, and at that point, there are already plants in that bed. We do a lot of cover crops. We build a lot of soil. We prefer to have plants with roots in our beds at all times, as many as possible. That's how we prefer to have our mulch. You know, we always want to have our soil covered. You never see soil bare in nature. Nature is always trying to cover soil. Whenever it's bare, it's sending in really tough plants to start breaking up that soil and get it covered as quickly as possible. So we have heavy layers of mulch down on our beds where we haven't had enough plants cover it. We'll bring in straw. We'll chop and drop whatever plants we have to just get the soil covered. In the wintertime, we're planting a lot of cover crops so that we can keep building that soil. These are a lot of legume, beans and peas, a lot of hairy vetch that does really well around here, and winter rye. These are ones that do really well. We'll also do daikon radish, which is more of a tuber, and a big radish that we'll chop.
Kangkong, guys.
They're really good for breaking up compacted soils. And we'll chop and drop the top and let that whole big tuber decompose in the soil. It's a huge amount of nitrogen being released into the soil. So by the time our cannabis is ready to go into the beds in May, we have already chopped and dropped this cover crop probably at least once, maybe even twice. It's probably come back by then. We've probably already been growing some lettuces. We have kale growing in the garden year round. It's all about diversity. You know, a diverse system is a strong system, like we mentioned before. So we try to have as many plants in there as possible. My girlfriend is an herbalist, so there's a lot of herbs in the garden. And when we're planting plants in the garden, we're thinking about IPM, integrated pest management. How do we deal with pests? And so once again, I want to have nature as my ally. I want to let nature do the work for me. And so in nature, you have tons of diversity, tons of plants, tons of native pollinators, tons of native predators, lots of plants that are going to provide a food source.
And I heard also with cannabis ecology, like THC helps prevent like fungi or other like harmful, like probably like harmful insects. It prevents them from like
what
destroying
does
the plant.
cannabis shield against? Like if I was to put it beside my tomatoes, would it help the tomatoes? Or would it
No, cannabis isn't so much going to keep anything away from anything else. Cannabis is usually the one that your other plants attracted pests to, that your sickly tomato plant attracted the aphids to, and now they're on your cannabis. That's
right? So
how it
no.
goes. Cannabis is very easy to grow. It just wants to grow. It's usually we baby it to death. We do too much when really it just wants to be left alone. Let nature do its thing. So a lot of those plants that we plant in that garden, like I was saying, are part of that pest management plan. So we want to plant plants that are going to repel pests, and those will be things with a lot of really high terpenes. They have a lot of strong smell. Those will be things like mints and rosemaries and lavenders. And we want to have plants that are going to attract some of the native predators. These are plants we call banker plants.
Right.
They have a pollen source, usually a food source. People buy a lot of these predator bugs and introduce them into their gardens. And the minute they're done eating all the pests, if there's no other food sources, they leave. Right. So it's good to have a lot of these other plants in there. Certain types of peppers will have these pollens.
Lemongrass. It's a spice country, so the Philippines has a lot of fragrant herbs, some of which we probably don't use or we can't source in grocery stores.
Yeah.
By the way,
a lot of these
Attorney Henry is here too, so I'm gonna put him in the show.
Oh,
right?
so yeah, Attorney, there you go.
We'll continue.
So Attorney Henry represents a lot of farmers.
How are you?
Ayun.
Good morning. Magandang umaga from Manila, Philippines.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Attorney. Oh, there you go. Oh, wait, he's supposed to be there. There you go. All right.
Hi, Henry. Thanks for joining us. I've been hearing about the good work you're doing in the Philippines there.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate your good words. I've been listening a few minutes ago, and it's really interesting your advocacy, the topic that you've just discussed. So, actually, I was invited by Alog Assembly to discuss the updates on the cannabis advocacy here in the Philippines. The discussion or the topics that you've just discussed is really closely related to the recent works that we've been doing. So for the first half of 2022, we actually conducted a lot of regional visits. We've been to a lot of provinces because it's really important for a cannabis movement to involve regional and grassroots groups and movements. We have a special interest on organizing local farmers of cannabis to help them preserve the regional and local varieties of cannabis. We've been to Quezon, Cavite, Rizal, and Bacolod, of course, and Cebu. So shout out sa mga Cebuano, the best local variety I've tried the recent years, no? So that legend from mga taga Manila lang to outside Cebu, no, na parang iba yung there's a premium on the Ubek strain, no? We call it Ubek, but for the locals, they just it's just locally grown here. So it's really important, and it's really interesting that the local farmers and the local varieties survive, considering that that the country just experienced one of the most violent drug war, no, in the recent history. So that's also the importance why we conducted these consultations to know their conditions, their issues, situations, and that will lead to crafting better policies. So just recently, we had the national consultations where, for the first time, regional delegates, again, from grassroots organizations, convened, no? Julie actually attended online. It's a hybrid event that time, and for the first time, we gather and discuss issues confronting different representatives from the regions, and that eventually lead to the consultations and talks with Senator Robin Padilla, wherein for the first time
We have a
um,
senator named Robin Hood.
we have a Senate bill. There's an actual bill filed uh, in the Senate for the medical access on cannabis. And in all fairness, with his office, he's very they are open and willing
Mhm.
to listen to the recommendations of the advocates, because
Yeah,
primarily whatever legislation that will come up, it should be foremost
should be pro farmer.
access to the patients. It should the
Mhm.
issues it should be affordable and accessible to the
Yes.
majority of the Filipinos and the patients.
Kakao. Mhm.
And in Congress, there are actually seven proposals right now. These are individual proposals in the lower house, and we're just waiting for it to be heard. And also, we filed a petition on the Dangerous Drugs Board. No, so even though the United Nations have rescheduled cannabis on the international level, the Philippines have not yet aligned with that scheduling. So under the rules and under the law, for the first time, we filed a petition on behalf of the patients. So Donna and of course Mami Weng of Medcan Party, on behalf of their minor children. They want to, they're asking or demanding the Philippine government through the Dangerous Drugs Board to align its scheduling on marijuana,
With the
hoping
UN.
that this will eventually lead to access, safe access for them. Um, of course, there are issues that are recently happening. Um, we have to talk about the son of the arrest and eventual acquittal of the case of the son of the Secretary of Justice.
Mhm.
Um, it, it's 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 really glaring how fast the justice rolls, or the court decided on the case of the son of the secretary, um, comparing to the other cases that I personally handled. Of course, I have clients who are patients. They have conditions, and marijuana is their medicine, but they're in jail right now, and it's taking too long for
Mhm.
the court to take all these cases. These are
Yeah.
the result of the drug war of the
Yeah.
past administration. The jail are congested 600%,
Mhm.
70%, up to 80% of the cases being filed to courts are all drug cases. Most of them
Yeah.
simple possession. Majority of them poor, and most likely their rights were not they were not afforded of their
They were,
constitutional
yeah.
rights or their basic rights. And eventually, most of these cases will be dismissed by the court
Mhm.
because the enforcers didn't follow what are the supposedly procedures. Now,
So they're
who
suffering for nothing.
exactly who will be
Yeah.
blamed for that 6 months to years of imprisonment? That
Mhm.
from the very start they are
How can you
unlawfully
take back those
arrested.
years, diba? You've lost so many years to
Exactly,
negligence. And the
and
only people who seem to have justice are those who have connections to the powers that
exactly.
be.
Yeah,
It's
they get
really
the
a privilege to
Mm.
have an access to private lawyers. I mean, under our constitution, um, the state will provide if you can't afford the private lawyers. But um, because of all these cases being filed, these are all workloads for the public attorneys. So they themselves are affected of these condition. No, I mean the Philippines still is considered one of the harshest countries to be arrested cannabis. Single joint, Joey, if you
That's
can
actually
imagine, can land you 12 years of
yeah.
imprisonment here in the Philippines. A single uh, pot, if you
Mhm.
cultivate of a pot, you're arrested. That's lifetime imprisonment under our law. So considering that law that we currently have, and I also have to mention that there's a recent trend of high school students, 18 years old, being arrested in campus, either during a security check
Right
within the
now.
compounds.
Mhm.
There's a case recently that a teacher discovered that a
Yes,
student
I saw that.
possessed a I don't know, a small possession, of course, a small amount.
Like a batch.
Right.
That student is facing 12 years of imprisonment
Right.
under our law. This has to change. Um, um,
there's there's something that Joey was talking about earlier that in a funny way it connects to what you just said, where if high school students have access to the internet, they're getting information about how weed
Mm-hmm.
is a medicine, can help, blah 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 blah, but their parents are of a completely different mindset or are in completely different spaces of the internet and refuse to accept things. Parang there's a selection of what portion of the internet I'm gonna pay attention to, right? And so you're getting kids who are curiouser and curiouser with what the rest of the world already knows. But you
Yes,
have these authority figures who continue to impose draconian laws. And like it really is time for a change for the cannabis laws. And I wanted to ask Attorney Henry because the last time we spoke, we were still recovering from Duterte. So basically, you're saying that in this new administration, it's still just as harsh, or even I don't know, it's a completely different world when it comes to the drug war with this president. What's it like?
yes,
no, it's still the same.
It's still the
Um,
same.
uh, Drug war still exists in
ongoing.
the Philippines.
Mhm.
I mean, I can just imagine all the messages I've been receiving, stories how they were illegally arrested, how they were just arrested with a single joint, and later on they will be other substance or a bigger amount will be planted against them, or they will be charged with a different case, which impose a heavier penalties. So
Or
there's
sometimes
still
what I heard too, attorney, is that some of them, even though like they're done with their cases, the authorities still threatens them like almost in a monthly basis because they know that they have a history already. So
Yeah,
they threaten them, they get money
there's
from them just
prejudice.
so yeah.
Yeah.
So, so they get ahead with them in that way, but in a wrong way. So a lot of people are really like suffering right now because of that.
Yeah, so given all of this, thank you so much for the update, Attorney Henry. Like I feel like we really needed to hear that because it sets the tone for like it's such a huge contrast. What's how bad it is in the Philippines compared to the good that it could do. The good that
Yes,
legalization could do for the Philippines. Like with legalization, you wouldn't have to worry about open conversations about how are we going to raise our teenagers alongside weed, like what age is appropriate, like those wouldn't even be taboo conversations because those are the conversations that happen like after all is said and done, after we've mourned our dead, blah 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 blah, diba? So
I agree.
I keep going back to permaculture as a solution for climate change because that's
yes,
one of the biggest things that is happening in the Philippines, diba? Like it's it solves so many legalization would solve so many things. It would solve our cash crop problem. It would solve the fact that we're a huge agricultural country. We have lands that are left like untended to because the owners want to don't know what to do with them because we're raised to get as far away from manual labor as possible. So parang this is a I'd love to hear from the both of you about like how can we think in terms of solutions for like when we're legalized, because this paints a picture for people. This makes people imagine that future, and if we can imagine that future, then it becomes more possible, 'di ba?
Well, I would hope that that the Philippines would be looking towards Thailand right now. You know,
Yes.
another place we just thought would never come away from their conservative policy, and
Right.
look how they have just completely embraced it.
Yeah.
They're certainly not getting it right by any means, but at least it's opened up a lot of business, and a lot less people are going to be going to jail, you know, or being extorted like they had been. My heart just goes out to the Philippines, man. What you guys have faced out there. I did some reading today about President Rodrigo Duterte and the war on drugs and what's gone on out there over his reign, last 6 years. They say 25,000 people were killed.
Probably more.
Probably more, probably way more.
Unaccounted.
And yeah, my heart just goes out to everybody out there and the fight you guys are in. And I just think you guys are all so brave. And, you know, we faced a lot of drug war here, but it wasn't like that. I mean, it wasn't like facing the death penalty for, you know, 10 grams of hash. You know, I mean, it's terrifying. And that it's still like that over there, that it's still business as usual. That is so terrifying to me. Yeah, I just got so much, you know, respect for you guys. You guys are real cannabis warriors. Like, and I know I want to hear about, you know, what is the Philippines' history with cannabis, because I know before 1972, that Dangerous Drug Act, you guys had cannabis. Cannabis was a part of your culture, and like you're saying, Henry, it's still there, and it's still there in those communities. And how, you know, how do we preserve that? That's such important history and culture, and the medicinal discoveries that could be found in those strains that could help your people and people around the world. It has to be explored. It would be irresponsible to not regulate this where we can explore that. And, you know,
I agree with you, Joey. That is actually one proof that despite the drug war, despite the harshest, most violent execution of drug policy, because it is deeply rooted with our culture, because it's there. Even though this government first thought that it should be prohibited, it's already there. When you go to the provinces, our older relatives will just refer it to as a medicine. It's just as simple as that. There are still provinces that the indigenous peoples are really known to cultivate this plant. Up to now, one particular province is known for the indigenous peoples there, that there's a premium if they harvested a really good variety of weed. So it really exists, and it will not go away. So it's interesting. You also mentioned Thailand. So recently, we visited Thailand, and my key takeaway was I was just overwhelmed. It just gave me a window to that future, that the Philippines, what will happen to the Philippines. It's basically same climate, same culture, different language, but being there, you're just in a different province. I'm just away from Manila.
Here's something I want to add, attorney. Here's something I want to add about Thailand and the Philippines. I have a friend who's a grower there. I think you know him too. I think you know him too. You know Dope. So he went to Thailand, right? So he's a grower, and he looks at the flower and stuff like that. And we have a chance. We could do better. I mean,
competitive.
Like competitive like that. I mean, if it happens, I mean, that's gonna happen in the future. Like, if, for example, it's gonna be like like an Asian competition like that.
I had a chance to try.
But we have a great soil from the
I
Philippines,
agree.
and it will help a lot of our farmers. It will boost our agriculture and tourism.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There,
Absolutely, it will happen.
No
the,
question
the, the
about it.
premium Thai stick that we got from a dispensary, so
Yeah.
it's really well prepared, so expensive than those available from the
Yes.
streets. So we have to try it.
Yes.
It's almost the same good local weed that we
Ang
have in
taray.
the Philippines.
Ang
Yeah.
taray.
It's
Share
just
flip,
basically the
attorney.
same. Yeah, so
Yeah.
if
Our
we
weed
have
is
the chance, I
good.
miss that. I miss that. You know that it's just different, but it's almost the same.
Right.
So just going back, you're also talking about climate change, for example,
Yeah.
and our indigenous, the practices of our indigenous people. So
Yeah.
it's already well documented that drug war um, um, contributes to worsens our problem with the
Exactly.
climate change. So imagine that those plots of land that have been cultivating by the farmers already. When the police raid that land
Yeah.
and they uproot all the harvest, the
Yeah.
farmers, the indigenous people, will be forced to go deep to the forest
Mhm.
to plant or to prepare those lands again for cultivating marijuana. So
Yeah.
instead of we're having these forests that are not really intended
Yun.
for
Yeah.
cultivating marijuana, but because of the drug war, our indigenous peoples are
Yeah.
forced to do
To
that, and that
develop land that
contributes
should have been left
to the
alone.
problem that we have. So it's
Mhm.
everything really is correlated.
Yeah.
There's a correlation. Really, one story that's also connected with the climate change and also with the drug war. There's a community of fisher folks in Cebu. This is in Cebu. So there's a rise of documented user of substances that they are not using that before, but they were forced to use substance because their catch are dwindling. When they go to the open sea, their catch are dwindling. They have to extend hours in the open sea, and that's a direct consequence of our climate change.
Yeah.
So uh,
Yeah.
it's really related. So the issue on drug war, the decriminalization of cannabis, and climate change. There's a lot of correlation with these two issues, and cannabis advocates should be conscious to address both of these issues.
Right. Right. For sure.
Jem even said on the comments, plus they are burning all the confiscated plants.
That's why they have a big budol fights
Free
after
smoke, so they can smoke it
they,
like far away
they burn.
without consequence.
Right.
Yeah, I want to say the other way, medical really got pushed forward here in the U.S. Was the mothers with their kids, with the
Oh my
kids and the babies
Yeah.
that really needed it, with the epileptic children whose seizures were being cured by it.
Yes.
When those images hit the TV, that was when the U.S. finally woke up. And when it was mothers out there talking about how they had to move to Colorado as cannabis refugees, go to a state where they wouldn't be arrested for trying to save their children's lives, that's
Right.
when it really hit home for people and resonated. So, you just got to keep putting that human face on it. And, nobody deserves to keep going through all this suffering. And
Mhm.
it really is medicine. It really can heal. And, so I'm just excited to see what happens in the Philippines. This is the beginning of a big change out there. The legislation that's coming. I mean, it's a start. That's even being talked about is a good thing. And you guys doing what you're doing, getting the education out there. That is the key. And the more we can just shine the light on all this, don't keep it in the shadows. We've got to talk about all this. And I'm just really honored again to get to talk with you guys tonight.
Thank you so much for coming on to talk to us, Joey, and thank you for coming for being here with us, Attorney Henry. We really enjoyed chatting with you guys,
Yes, thank
giving
you.
us updates about what's going
Always,
on in the Philippines, the
always an
introduction to
honor.
our
Yeah,
culture. Yeah.
And I really encourage to have discussions like this. So
we'll have
this is
more.
I
Yes,
always
there will be more.
mention this, that what Alab Assembly is doing, you guys are doing, is really important of having that conversations. These issues that we have right now, the trend on the arrest of students, the issue on
That's
the Remulia
disturbing.
case,
Yeah.
it gives us a platform to discuss further. Bakit nga ba tayo nagkukulong? Why are we sending
Exactly.
people
Jailing
to
people. Yeah.
jail if it is really a proven
Non-violent.
medicine? We just have
Yeah.
to continue discussing and informing, educating people that it is a
Yes,
medicine, and it is
Right.
so inhumane to imprison a person because of a plant. So
Yeah.
we just have to continue that discussion. So
yes,
maraming
that's like
maraming salamat
Thanks.
always lagi
Even
pag
with
thank you.
Leia,
invite.
it's her medicine.
Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joey said and Ara said. The knowledge is out there. It's on Google. Just one type on Google, everyone can see it. All we need to do is just let them know.
Like
Just
vouch for the information.
yeah,
Kasi
just share them information
yeah.
slowly. Slowly. This is that. Because our mentality, the old people mentality on back home, especially our
Yeah.
elderlies, man.
No, we need to
You
change a lot of
yeah, we need to
the
change that. So
traditional ways or
so
actually colonial
slowly.
ways that we've
But I have
been.
friends though. Slowly they're learning, they
Yeah.
accepting it.
Yeah.
True.
Like
Like my
maybe
We
we
mom and
can
my
planted the
already
dad.
seed
start
already,
planting or integrating
so we
permaculture
nurture and let
principles,
it grow.
Yes.
even if
So
we're
I'm
not
thankful.
planting cannabis yet. Yeah.
So I'm thankful for
Practice.
this. Thank you, Alab Assembly, for
Thank
making me
you.
part of this, especially Joey, and nice to meet you, Henry Attorney. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
for coming in,
Sure.
Bert.
Thank
And
you. We'll have more
Salamat din.
sessions
as you
like this,
said, there's gonna be
guys,
more conversation
and
like this.
more
It's gonna
different
be like this.
topics.
It's gonna be eye opening for people who really needs to understand cannabis. And really thank you, Sir Joey, for being part of this. This is really a mind
This is a
blowing
big
for
one. Yeah, thank you
really
so much.
amazing.
It would be
It's a
nice
good start. It's a
to
great
hang
start.
out soon. Yeah.
I'd like to
So
mention and to remind everyone that actually the fear or the stigma on marijuana for majority of Filipinos, it's
Mhm.
grounded on because it is criminalized.
yes,
Once we
Yeah.
decriminalize the plant, it's a change. The minds will eventually change.
will change.
You
Right.
experience that. I mean, our parents are afraid not because it's bad, but because they know we can be arrested, we can be
Yeah,
imprisoned.
there's a
Mhm.
consequences that
There's a
comes with it
May
because of
consequence.
the law.
right. Pero
Uh,
culturally speaking kasi Attorney Henry, like for example
It's like
here
we're
in
being
California,
brainwashed.
there's a huge Philippine population and there's still a lot of Filipinos na even though it's legal here, they still think, huh? Ano ba yan?
Oh
What's
yeah,
that?
even here, attorney.
Yeah, so there's still parang we also need to change the culture for the laws to be easier for people to lobby for, 'di ba? Well,
Especially
they
in
all go
US.
hand in hand naman. So,
Yeah, here
totoo,
in US it's
totoo.
not
yeah,
still the legalization is not still, perfect. There's still
Grabe.
flaws.
right.
When the
There's
first the
still a lot of
first
flaws.
the first joint that I smoked in Bangkok, we just have this trauma. Parang that parang 4 hours away I can be arrested by this. But now I can. We're just smoking in front of our hotel, and we're just
Yeah.
smoking like actually. Our local guy, the Filipino, siya pa yung nagsabi na parang wala na kayo sa Manila. We're no longer in
You're not in
Manila because
Manila.
we're
No longer
smoking it. The way we're smoking in Manila is like we're hiding, we're passing it
Hide.
really
See, Christian
discreetly.
has
So
my partner Christian
we
has a
have that
similar
we still
story.
have that trauma because it's still
Right.
happening. So it's important to continue this discussion and just
Yeah.
give any support that you can give to
Yeah.
the movement back home here in the Philippines. So
Yeah.
buhay kayong
Actually,
lahat.
yes.
I'd like to share also as Alab Assembly, we're also accepting like donations because we also give out to the Canal Legal Service in the Philippines, the ones
Yeah,
who cannot
that's
afford
right.
to pay legal fees because due to non-violent cannabis arrest or unlawful arrest. And we're
Very good.
also helping the Medical Cannabis Party continue with their movement. So hopefully we get to reach out to a lot more people and get, you know, get a bigger community to help us all out and then hear our voices. So that's all we want,
Yes,
to really share the good news
we
to
will work
everyone and
together.
help the fight. Yeah.
Yeah, we will work all
Thank
together.
you. I know that I did tell Joey that it's like an hour of live, and I don't know if you ate dinner already, but we're just so grateful that you stayed with us for an hour, and hopefully
Yes,
we'll
this is
invite you to
so.
more sessions, different topics, so we can talk and share to other people. But we're so grateful to everyone who watched, and to the Alab Assembly team, of course, the off-cam people as well, and of course to the Medcan Party, to Joey Berger. And I hope everyone has something that they learned from this session. And just to answer my very first question earlier, what is ecology? It is the branch of biology that deals with the relations of organisms to one another and to their physical
Amazing
surroundings.
answer.
So
Yes.
that's exactly what we talked about from beginning to end. And like all these movements, we're all related as well. We're like in one big
Yes,
biology, and everything is just part
Yes.
of nature. So keep it
it's
up.
part of life.
We're gonna get it. I know. I believe that the Philippines will open their doors
Manifest.
and we'll see the truth. Yes.
Right.
Thank you,
Yeah.
and again, have a
Yeah.
good night and good morning,
Bye.
Filipinas. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you again. Thank
Be
you.
Good
safe and
morning,
be
Philippines.
responsible. Bye.
Salamat.
Bye. Thank you
Bon.
again.